Welcome to BWI Live. I have no idea what we're going to talk about today. Nothing is happening. It's the off season. Penn State football is in a rut of no news, and we're going to make it up as we go, is what I would say in a normal January, at the end of January. But this is not a normal January. This is not what we're used to, I think, from the news cycle. Not only did Penn State football play in a college football playoff that had them playing late into the football season, but now they are dropping bombs left and right on college football with the hiring of Jim Knowles. That's going to dominate the conversation today. We're also going to get to the BWI Mailbag, because as much as I'm joking here about what we're doing today and the news cycle and all that stuff, we are back into our normal routine and rhythm, and we want to get your thoughts and questions here on the show, because this show is for you, the Penn State football fan, and the guys that know the most about it, that want to talk to you for an hour about it, Nate Bauer and Sean Fitz. Nate, you can't seem to kick the flu bug. Is it because you're out late night, burning the candle at both ends at basketball? Like, what's going on, man?
No, I whatever it is that's going around is it's impactful, and so that's what we got here. It's a lot of see. Here we go, coughing while talking. If I'm not talking, I'm good. But yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how an hour of me talking goes. Please feel free to pick up at any point.
Well, you're going to get a nice 10, 12-minute break in the middle of the show, because we'll get to Fitz's recruiting update in just a little bit, because recruiting is also in full swing right now. So, Fitz, how you doing today? Speaking of burning the candle at both ends, like, there's a lot of news flying around, and I appreciate you and Ryan and your efforts at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com to keep everybody updated on Junior Day and all that stuff we're talking about later in the show. So how you doing?
I'm great. I just realized that if Nate can't talk, he can't be as insufferable as I expected him to be today.
Whoa.
Following the Knowles stuff. So you're welcome, everyone. No, it's been a month, man. It has been a January and a half so far, especially at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you've been following along, there's plenty to go there. And Penn State just got into recruiting as well, because that run through the playoff, and they planned for this. That run through the playoff had them going so late that you essentially didn't lose a weekend for recruiting, but you needed that buffer weekend in there. So Junior Day last weekend, Junior Day this weekend, then it goes to a dead period in February. So there's plenty to talk about, like, here in the here and now. And like, even and I put this out in a tweet last night, like, even the guys that just wrapped up playing, Kobe King got invited to the Senior Bowl, Tyler Warren, Jalen Reed all got invited to the Senior Bowl. Those guys are banged up. Like, they played a long season, and you're going to sit there and say it wasn't much longer than if you played a New Year's Day game, but like you add a couple of games in before that, and that makes for a long time. So those guys, best of luck in there preparing for the draft. But it's not having Jalen Kimber, by the way, in the Shrine Bowl this week. So not everybody has opted out of those things, but like it's changed the math so much in terms of how things work and how
think
things
about combine prep, right?
Yeah.
I mean, guys used to start for combine prep in December if they opted out of bowl games.
Yeah. You've got combine prep, you've got winter workouts. They're going to start back up in February, and spring practice starts a little bit later this year, just because of how the calendar works with spring break and then pushing the blue-white game back a little bit. So you get a little bit more time naturally in there, but still, football is a tough game to play for 5 months at a time, and then you just turn around and start it again. So it's pretty crazy how all that works, but it gives us something to talk about. We're excited to talk about it. We're excited to talk about all the changes at Penn State.
Yeah, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. Jim Knowles is the new Penn State defensive coordinator, and of course, we covered this at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you want to get kind of the lay of the land conversation, we had that on Sunday with myself and with Greg Pickle. But we have to get Nate Bauer, who's been covering this better than anybody else. I'm just going to give you an opening statement, Nate. Just where you want to go with this in terms of your perspective on what's important in the story of Jim Knowles becoming the Penn State defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I think
I'm sorry, you were saying?
Didn't see that one coming, did you?
Yeah, let's go. Look. Guys,
Last time. That was the last. I promise that's the last time.
They hate me already. I'm already despised. This isn't helping.
In certain circles.
Yeah, in certain circles. Well, look, here's my thing. James Franklin wanted Jim Knowles for years. And that's the moral of the story is for years, this has been a guy who has been targeted for one reason or another. It hasn't worked out. The timing hasn't worked out. Jim Knowles hasn't been interested. You name it. They just never meshed, right? It never came together at the same time. And so this is the actualization of all the stuff that James Franklin has been talking about for 11 years, right? I mean, you cannot look at this as, and I know people will, but you cannot look at this as an isolated incident, as oh, this is Penn State announcing its presence on the national college football landscape. Sure, I get that, and that's what it looks like, but not really. What it really is James Franklin's persistence winning all of the wars that it took 9 years to win, to have a new athletic director, to have people who are sympathetic and not just sympathetic, but eager to develop and strengthen the Penn State football program. And so now those people are in positions to affect change. And the guy that he has wanted, the guy that James Franklin has thought would be a perfect fit, would a Pennsylvania guy coming back to, to Penn State, like all of those things have at this point come to fruition. And it's the exclamation point, but it's the exclamation point at the end of a very, very long sentence.
In all caps.
In all caps.
Yeah. The on-field implications are also important because so before we get to that, I guess the lead up, the build up to Jim Knowles, the battle back and forth creates a storyline. And as you just pointed out, it's the exclamation point on 9 years worth of frustration and toil for the Penn State football program at large. Obviously, James Franklin, the spearhead of that. I don't want to get to the expectation part just yet, but it just feels like the impact of it from the narrative perspective. Can a defensive coordinator make that much of a difference, that much of an impact? Because there is going to be the conversation of, okay, well, now it has to be the best you've ever seen because of, the hoopla we made of this. Fitz, like, do you think that, I guess I don't know how you put those things into context.
The expectations have to be high. I mean, there's no way getting around it. I saw someone say championship or bust. I have a problem with the or bust just in general, but the expectations should be high. The expectations were already high, no matter who they brought in, considering the consistency and the level of play of this defense over the last 5 years. So, I don't think it changes all that much, but you've got a guy with championship experience. You've got a guy with the experience of, how do you say this? Playing in the Big 12, then playing in the Big 10, and then just changing your style to fit what you've got, because you've got the best athletes at Ohio State. I think he's going to have to adjust. I think he's going to have to sort of amend the way that he calls things until he gets a feel for it. Now, the good thing here is you saw this year that you got time to do that. You've got flexibility in terms of not how many games you can lose, but how much time you can get the best version of yourself, because the best version of yourself no longer matters in October or November, because if you lose one game, you're done. The best version of yourself happens December, January, and he certainly got that out of his Ohio State team. So I think, yes, absolutely, the expectation should be high. You've got two of the highest paid coordinators on their respective sides of the balls. It should be like you should win a lot of games this year, and you should advance as far as you can humanly expect to advance. But we're sitting here in January talking about next January. Like, that's kind of the thing here. There's a lot of football to be played. There's a lot of breaks to happen. I mean, nobody sat here last year and talked about how Tom Allen would, have to adjust without KJ Winston. Like, there's a lot of things that can happen there. So yeah, I absolutely think the expectations should be high internally, externally, however you measure it. It was a shock to see a bunch of people putting Penn State preseason number one, because there's still holes on this roster that we'll talk about ad nauseum for the next couple of months. But absolutely, with Jim Knowles coming in, that's not just a statement to sort of the nation, the conference, and all that stuff. It's a statement to your athletic director, your coaches, everybody, that the expectations are championship level expectations. And now that Penn State is supposedly spending at a level that you wanted them to spend all along, that's what comes with it.
Nate, I'm not asking you questions. I'm just going to open the floor again for you to respond to anything you want to in the story of this conversation. Just generally, because like I don't understand as much as you do what the important points here. And like as the point guard, I'm just going to pass you the ball, and then you can ISO ball, whatever you want to do. This is the triangle. You're the focal point of the triangle here.
I think that the main question that I've seen over and over again is why Penn State, when you're coming from Ohio State and having just won a national championship, right? That's a valid question to ask. I think that internally you have seen enough smoke on the interwebs over the last couple of days to suggest strongly that there were some, issues that existed. Look, they exist everywhere. Every staff, like these are huge living, breathing organisms. It is not to suggest that Penn State is perfect in any way and that Ohio State is some sort of cultural train wreck. That is not the case. However, I think for Jim Knowles, it became clear that a change of scene was, I don't know about necessary, but invited. Right? It's a place. It's a thing that if you don't enjoy your work environment, if you don't like the parameters around what you're doing, or you feel that they can be better, it's end of the day. A lot of this stuff is the same things that all of us experience in the workforce every day, right? You're always looking for different. Not necessarily always looking for different opportunities, but you're open to them when they arrive. And so you want to put yourself in the best place that you possibly can. And I think that there is a thing happening at Penn State right now that if you're not paying attention, like you would have to have your head in the sand to not acknowledge and recognize everything that's happening, right? All the players that are coming back for another year. The culture that James Franklin has established at Penn State, the buy-in, the we team, that whole aspect, it's strong. Like it's just a really strong moment, I think, for Penn State football, and the notion that would be appealing to other people, you're kidding yourself if you don't think that, and you can see it not only with Jim Knowles, but keeping Anthony Poindexter, right? That is a reflection of this. There have been many other coaches on this coaching staff. Fitz, I'm sure you're aware of some that I'm not, and vice versa. But I would venture to guess that everyone, or almost everyone, has had other opportunities.
Oh yeah,
not necessarily this cycle, right? I'm not necessarily saying this cycle, but other opportunities that have been as good or better. Better than Penn State, that they have turned down in order to. Sorry, I'm so distracted by David Bordner, and if you want to just like get rid of him, I'd be totally cool with that. So in any case, it is just a very fascinating dynamic to see Penn State not only be invested in pursuing somebody like that, right? I mean, there weren't a lot of people who would have said before the coaching search started, hey, this is a guy that Penn State can pursue and reasonably land, right? They went out, they made the commitment to doing that, and they did it.
So let's talk about the on-field part for a second, Fitz. The idea that this is a fit because, I guess, what do you see as the biggest differences, changes, or not changes with Jim Knowles on the field in terms of what Penn State fans should expect? Because it feels like what we see from Ohio State last year is similar to what we'll see at Penn State next year. There might not be a lot of visual changes, but there might be some things that feel different. Do you kind of get that sense in the lay of the land?
Yeah, I mean The difference between a lot of defenses is very subtle. Like, there's a reason the 4-2-5, 4-3 hybrid defense is taken off in college, and that's because it works. Like, that's because you can cover the most ground, you can, give up the least amount of yards, least amount of points, and that's worked. I mean, it's like on offense. Like, offenses are not that different. You call the same plays just out of different formations, and that's pretty much across the board. Well, that's true on defense as well. So you've got different calls in the moment. You've got different coverage mixing. You've got different pressures and things like that. Absolutely. And I think that's the difference in having an elite coordinator and just having a coordinator that can get you, to the playoff or wherever you may get. So I don't think it changes much in the framework of things. It's going to be similar to what Brent Pry did. It's going to be similar to what Manny Diaz did. It's going to be, it's just a mesh of everything when you take a look at how different and how, I guess, the subtle differences between defense to defense is not that much. Penn State's defense did not differ that much from Ohio State. Now, you play with the chips that you have. I mean, and that's why it's a chess match, right? You've got your strongest things. I don't know that you have Caleb Downs at Penn State, but you have to find a guy that can play in different roles. Tony Rojas can play in space and in the box. You've got Dennis Sutton and Zane Duran up front. You've got to maximize what they are able to do while playing that into the other 10 guys in your defense. And I think that's what he does really well. And I think you saw that down the run, the stretch run that Ohio State had in the playoff, is their stars shined. Like they play star forward football, game record football. And that's what I think James Franklin has wanted to do. Now, it sucks because you think, okay, this could have really worked a year ago with those defensive tackles that eat up a lot of space in the middle and that opens things up for Abdul Carter, and then those safeties and et cetera. But it's a hypothetical, doesn't matter. But like, man, if you get a guy like that can call to their strengths, and I don't know that Penn State was always like that under Tom Allen, then you've got something cooking there. And I think that's the biggest change. I structurally, it's not like you're going from a air raid offense to an option. This is not that kind of change. But you've got subtle differences in coverages. I think that was the big conversation with Tom Allen is, hey, that zone got torn up a couple of times and put you in a hole. And all of a sudden you switch to, I think those are the things that you look at differently with a guy like Jim Knowles. Now, I go back to your question. I think it's a really good one. Like, how much does it change? Like, how much does it change the outcome of your absolute finality there? How much does it change? Probably not a ton, but you've got a guy that's did it and just won a national championship. So you kind of give him the benefit of the doubt on that end.
Yeah, JC Corrigan here in the chat. One of the few things that has been, like, I don't understand what's going on today. Normally we got, like, everyone has a good time. We hang out. We talk about Penn State football. The chat is spicy to a degree that is not, like, normal for our show. So, like, let's everyone just chill out. First thing here, though. JC Corrigan says, T-Frank, does this offer schematic agility that in a defense that we haven't seen? So, JC, I think what Fitz said there was, last year, maybe it didn't really reach that level, but they have in the past. I would say that Manny Diaz was able to do that. They have had moments 2021 with Brent Pry that they've been able to put guys in position to succeed. And as Fitz called it, star forward. I would say that has been something you see from Jim Knowles in that defense, especially last year. I think that the game plan tailoring to the opponent while staying within the realm of what you do, that is absolutely something I saw from that team last year. Now, again, talent dictates what you can and can't do. And so if you don't see exactly what they did at Ohio State last year, maybe it's because they don't have Caleb Downs or Tyleik Williams or, their box linebackers. They've got different skill sets and talents. That is something that every team goes through. So I do think that there is some of that to this defense and that creativity on game day and in the preparation. Nate, when we talk about the implications of the wider context of college football and Penn State's role in it. We're going to get to some of this in the mailbag. Actually, the first thing we need to do is we need to take a quick break. We need to cleanse everybody's palate with some Anti-Fragile. So Fitz, tell me, what's the latest on tap at Anti-Fragile right now? What's your favorite going on right now down in State College?
Man, I got sick after the Orange Bowl, and I haven't had a beer since it's been 3 weeks now. So that's been rough. It's because that means I haven't been to Anti-Fragile. Actually, the day after we got back, I did go down there, had a wonderful West Coast IPA. Hopefully that's still on tap, or but it's probably not, because you know why? Because they small batch their stuff. They make quality stuff in small batches. And that's the thing. When you go every time, it's going to be different. So you're going to get IPAs, you're going to get hazies, you're going to get Pilsners, which I love. You're going to get an Imperial Stout earlier this year that was fantastic. So they are all over the map in the best way possible. When you talk about Anti-Fragile Brewing, you can go down there and get your John Johns, get your cheesesteaks, set up, get your cocktails. You've got everything that you want in downtown State College. I know that this has been a really, really awesome partnership. As Nate said last week, or whenever we were on last time, we pay for our stuff when we go down there. It's because we believe in our stuff, in their stuff. We believe in the quality behind it, and we believe it's a fun place to hang out. So if you're in town for a winter weekend, for a hockey game, for a basketball game, or something like that, stop by, have a beer, have two if you would like. Really, really good stuff. We can't say enough about their support of us, and we can't say enough about their product, because we really do believe in it. So definitely, if you're in town, check it out. All kinds of great stuff with Anti-Fragile Brewing. And yeah, can't go wrong with that draft list, because you can find pretty much anything you want and make it happen. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the kombucha, the hard kombucha, all the cocktails that they have. It's a really great combination. So we appreciate their support, and we appreciate them existing, because that's where we go, and that's where we hang out.
Yeah, we appreciate them also being a sponsor with us for the full year, and committing to us the way we have, you guys especially have committed to them. So appreciate Anti-Fragile being a part of the conversation here on the show. And Nate, I want to throw this back to you in terms of, what else do you think is important from the last week of the story with Jim Knowles, Penn State, and this evolution, as it seems, in Penn State being on sprinting up the mountaintop, as opposed to where they have been trying to climb and climb and climb, and now it feels like they've hit a turbo button in that pursuit, or at least that's how this feels like that's the turn.
I don't think it, and this is kind of an obvious point to make, but I don't think it hurts having the guy that has limited your offense to its lowest scoring output in each of the past two seasons not on the team that you're chasing and trying to beat, one, and then two, in your box, right? I mean, that both of those elements, I think, reshape a little bit of what the Ohio State game, becomes for this season. But it also, I see all sides of the argument where it's like, oh, well, this has to be the year that Penn State beats Ohio State. Ohio State's going to be good. Like, that's just what it is. I mean, and certainly they have their own situations to resolve and personnel to decide coming back and leaving, and all the stuff that Penn State went through in the immediate aftermath of its run to the semifinal. They have to do the same thing, obviously, in the aftermath of their national championship. But I do think for Penn State to have that guy in your coaching box, not giving Andy Kotelnicki the fits that he has over the last 2 years.
That's the thing that's like gets me, is like, you're going to bring in Jim Knowles with all the secrets about how he stopped Andy Kotelnicki, and that self-scouting that they talk about so often. Like, I think that's going to be important in the offseason. Like, it's going to be more important in the offseason than it is going to be through 60 minutes on a Saturday. Like, it's and don't get me wrong, it's very important, but you think about the growing that he's able to do. I mean, he's obviously had Andy Kotelnicki's number, whether it be putting Caleb Downs on Tyler Warren, whether it be, just the general things that they went through at Kansas and Oklahoma State. Like, he's had his number. Okay, now you're on the same team. Tell me why you had his number. So like that stuff is going to be valuable, and more valuable than looking at Ohio State in 2025 and saying that this is how I think we can stop them, because Ohio State's going to evolve too. Like, they're going to bring in new guys. They're going to bring in new thoughts.
Well, they got to get a new coordinator too. So
new coordinator, new quarterback, new running back, like everything is new. And like, that's going to be the question leading up to the Ohio State game this year, is how much does that matter? And James is going to push it aside and say, well, they're a different team than they were last year. And he's right. So I think there's more value in the self-scouting than there is in the actual, like, head to head with Ohio State.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break from this. We'll get to more questions about this in the mailbag when it comes to some of the bigger picture stuff, some of the on-field things. But recruiting is a big thing at this time of year. Penn State hosted a junior day. So, Nate, we're going to give you a minute to cough your lungs out and kind of get all the phlegm out for about 10 minutes. And then we're going to get back to you on the mailbag. Now, of course, I mentioned there was a junior day this weekend, but the most important thing that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet, because everything else has happened, is Penn State got a commit this past weekend. And after watching a little bit of this, you're going to see some of the film here on the YouTube channel, which, by the way, if you're listening on a podcast on any of these, I always encourage you to go and check out the highlights of the prospects and the things we put up here, because, whoo boy, Fitz, Julian Peterson. Tell me about what you know about Julian Peterson, the latest Nittany line in the class of 2026.
Julian Peterson, a cornerback from South Jersey, plays for Bill Belton. You may remember his name, former Penn State running back. He's now coaching at Winslow Township. Penn State's been pretty active with Belton's kids in the past. This is the first, well, I guess this is the second commit. Johnny Shakir committed to Penn State a couple of years ago as a wide receiver, was at another school and then transferred to Bill Belton's school. And then actually Penn State parted ways with him. Belton was actually a part of that. Just I think Penn State probably dodged a bullet in that manner. But you look at Julian Peterson, that's an interesting one, because this is a guy that's been to campus several times. He's camped for Penn State. So they've got the athletic triangle numbers and things like that. And those look really, really good.
Yeah.
He came to the SMU playoff game on his own dime, which I think the more we talk about this cycle, the more we're going to look at those guys and say, hey, that's genuine, interest in getting there and making it happen and buying your own parking, all that kind of stuff that comes together. So,
yeah.
So when he committed this weekend, looking back on the hindsight, not a major surprise. I'm not going to lie. We were caught a bit off guard when we found out Sunday that it was probably going to go down. I was actually writing up a piece that was going to go out and never made it because Julian Peterson beat us to the punch here. But you look at what he brings to the table, and I mentioned it on the board. He's like a 3D printed version of Joey Porter. He is like as close to 6'2" as you can get. I don't have the updated numbers from this weekend, but like he's not a 6'6". He's a 6'2", 6'2", which is good to have. Ran a 4.48 at camp last year, had a shuttle in the 4.3. So athletically, biologically, like the length and everything like that is a prototypical new age cornerback. I think his film, it's good. It's solid. It's not a situation like last year when you had Omari Gaines. You looked at the film and you're like, I don't know if he can play here. I think Peterson can fit in here on that practice field, on the game field, and things like that. So I think there's a lot to like about him. I still think he's got to make strides, on the football field, which is obviously the be all end all here. Yep. But 6'2" corner that can run in the 4.4s, you're probably going to, raise some eyebrows at that. So Peterson, a good fit in that manner. And, I was talking to somebody yesterday and I mentioned the Joey Porter thing, and they're like, well, you look at Joey Porter's junior film, it's not particularly great. And okay, so here we are comparing Julian Peterson to Joey Porter, which is exactly what I didn't want to do. But you look at, like, if you're creating a player, if you're looking at the frame, there's a lot of similarities there. So very encouraged to see the direction that he's going to keep going in. And going back to what I said, earlier about can he fit in athletically, a 4.48 at 6'2" is flying. So I'm very, very curious to see how this one plays out. I think probably high 3 stars where we have him. And I think that's probably about right now. 87 on three, number 28 corner nationally on the on 3 industry rankings. So a very interesting take at this point in time, just because we haven't really talked a ton about him, but there's a lot to like there, and there's a lot of upside on the back end with Julian Peterson. So excited to watch him grow. And again, if you show that kind of interest in getting to a playoff game on your own dime, there's certainly, something to be said for that. So I'm very curious to see how that this one plays out in the long run. And I think it goes back to the rest of the class. You look at the number of guys that they can take with the still proposed, not approved, expansion to 105 scholarships / roster limit. And you probably have more reason to take a guy like Julian Peterson at this point than you probably would have had in past years. So again, excited to see him grow. There's a lot of tools there. There's a lot of boxes that are checked. He's just going to continue to have to improve as a football player. And I think he's a guy that a lot of people were interested in.
Yeah, you had me at 6'2", in running in the 4.4s.
Yeah,
there are two with the other numbers too. I think, as you mentioned, some of the explosive numbers, because you can be big, fast, and linear, and that's not a good cornerback. Right. But to change directions and have the ability to play running back in high school, you saw there in the highlights, like the athletic profile, when you don't have any of those blemishes. And the only one I would say is, in terms of the comparison to Joey Porter Jr., is his arms are a little short, but also Joey Porter Jr. was a condor. He had the wingspan of a pterodactyl.
Of a DN. Yeah, he was a 34-inch guy at the combine. Like, that's, I don't know where that fits in over the last 10 years, but it's got to be top 5% or something of that nature. So not as long, but long enough. And I think Joey spoiled that for everybody moving forward when you take a tall corner.
Yeah, but the building blocks I think are super important, as you mentioned, and it's the ability at 180 pounds and the way he plays. I think in terms of the physical side of the game, he probably has a little more than Joey going on right now in terms of the way he attacks the ball and some of the things from a size perspective. I texted Fitz before the show and I'm like, he is a corner, right? Because I could see him growing into a safety size player, and Penn State loves these kind of tweeners, a guy that maybe could play in the slot at one point in terms of just, I don't see a problem with him tackling. Now, that is something that has to play out over time, but we're talking here, junior film, for a corner athlete. What can you do in terms of that? So here we have, just to point out Fitz's the comment about the class of 2026. Just a quick refresher: Kevin Brown, Messiah Mickens, Troy Hune, Matt Sieg, Daniel Jennings, Jasir Rogers, Jaquaden Guilford. Now, Julian Peterson is the first defensive back other than Matt Sieg in the class, the first corner. Just to get on the board with some of the other guys that they have. To me, like when that's your baseline of that physical ability, I think it's super promising for this class in 2026 to be one of those top 10 classes eventually, if he's able to develop the game on the other side, given Penn State's in on a lot of top prospects as well. Do you?
Yeah. And if you look at the corners that Penn State's brought in, like there's no particular prototype for that, because last year they brought in John Mitchell, who is in the middle in terms of height. They brought Belgrave Shorter, is a little bit taller, a little bit thicker, and he's already at safety. Then you got Kenny Woosley, who was a little bit shorter in the slot. So and Xavier Thomas as well. So there's no you have to be 6'1", 6'2" to get this done. You can take those guys, for lack of a better term, stash them, because it's going to take them a little bit longer to develop and to feel out really the speed and quickness of the college game. That's going to be the biggest thing. I mean, if you're 6'2", if you're tall kid, it's going to take longer for you to walk and chew gum, and that's certainly natural. And Joey Porter redshirted his first year. Like he came and started as a redshirt freshman because of that adjustment period. And on top of that, if you're in this 105 world where you have the ability to take more guys at a singular position, or guys at a position in this case where you eventually lose some to safety, just natural attrition then you can take a flyer on a guy that's 6'2" and 4'4" and feel pretty good about it. So I think that they feel pretty good about this one.
So let's get into Junior Day recap. Obviously, this is the best possible outcome from Junior Day and that weekend. What else kind of came out of the weekend in terms of thoughts and feelings from the first Junior Day that Penn State held in January?
Positive weekend, a little bit smaller of a group, and that's fine. Like, I don't think it's a big issue with numbers and things like that. But you find yourself in a position where you can, get more one-on-one time, get more time with, a guy like 2027 Peter Bork, the quarterback that was in, guy like Terry Wiggins, who is a guy that we're probably not talking about enough. The Coatesville linebacker, 6'3", 205, can certainly run, certainly has that sort of Condor-ish quality to him as well. So you've got a lot of different guys that, you look back and probably can see ending up in this class in the long run. I go back to a guy like Kari Adams from Maryland, and that's a really interesting prospect to me in the sense that he's just going to keep moving up. Like he's going to do the thing Brandon Finney did last year, where his stock is just going to keep going up. He's red hot right now with getting offers and things like that. But you continue to stay on him. You continue to be prevalent in his recruiting, and I think good things will happen with a guy like that. Caden Gebhardt was back. Ryan and I talked about him last week, getting him back quickly after he went to Clemson to see Tom Allen. He's a big fan of Tom Allen, but he's also a big fan of Penn State. He's the things have him, the articles here have him as a safety, but I think he's a linebacker. And we talk about that sort of hybrid position under Jim Knowles. It doesn't really change much with the Lion, the Star, the Jack, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really change much with how Jim Knowles works. And then we'll go with Matthew Canoe, the linebacker from Virginia. Says Penn State's at the top of his list. I certainly believe him based on his actions. He's been up a bunch. I picked up a Penn State offer late in the season, and that's a guy that, has got a lot of potential in terms of Is he a Mike? Is he an eventual edge? Something like that. But he's a really, really good football player. So I think it was a quality turnout for Penn State this weekend or this past weekend. They're going to continue to get good guys on campus this weekend and roll through it. And I think you probably see maybe 3 or 4 guys that jump on board in February because of these visits.
So outside of that, other news coming out of this weekend, I don't know how much time we want to spend on a top 12, but Penn State has a big part of the picture, it seems, from the offensive line perspective. Carter Scruggs announced his top 12. Unsurprisingly, Penn State was a part of it. What do you take from something like this?
That's a lot of schools, man. That's
Right.
a big shortened list. So I'll be more curious to when they get to 5, because I mean, so they have unlimited official visits now. But 5 is still kind of the key, because you start the last weekend of May, the first weekend of June when that calendar turns, and then you've got I think 4 weeks this year to turn that into official visits. And by the way, from a rules perspective, they wiped out July. Like the old Lash Bash, the old whiteout camps at the end of July, those are gone. Like July is completely dead now. College coaches celebrate. I think recruits and their families probably celebrate, because that was a meat grinder right there. Because you had guys that were going from all over the place trying to squeeze in 2 or 3 visits. You've got guys going across the country for certain barbecues, and you have to tell other schools no. So getting rid of that, I think, is a good thing for everyone's schedule. I enjoyed the camps. I enjoyed the Lash Bash. That's great little late summer boon. But these guys want to think about their preseason camp. And I think that's where you get with that. But Carter Scruggs, there's a lot of linemen on the board right now. And I think UC Trout keeps popping up all these different places. So he's probably going to surprise us with 1 or 2 guys, as he usually did. Remember last year at this time, we were not talking about Michael Troutman, and all of a sudden Michael Troutman, a pretty key member of that offensive line group. So they're going to continue to go. Scruggs, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? I think he's probably an interior guy. But there's a lot to like there. He came to camp. They liked him at camp. It's so hard right now, and I'm going to talk to Ryan about this a little bit, to sort of get the pecking order of where things are on the offensive line, because there's a lot of guys that have shown interest, and there's a lot of guys that Phil Troutman has shown interest in. And here we are, a couple years after a class.
Are you about to say what I think you're going to say?
Yeah, Penn State can be selective here.
Whoa!
I don't know that's what I was going for, but no, you think about a couple years ago when they signed what was it, Nate Bruce and Landon, and I think there was a JUCO. They were hurting, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, they're in a pretty good spot right now. So offensive line is still extremely hard to recruit, extremely hard to evaluate, but at the same time, the numbers make it easier for them to put together a really good class, and I think they're going to do that.
Yeah, I think Malik McNeil was the other guy in that class.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
And he ended up at JUCO. So
yeah. The last thing here is we have a story that is a story, but not a story. And I don't know how much we're going to get into here, but one of the reasons I want to talk about it is I just wanted to show Messiah Mickens' full highlights from this last season, which we haven't really gotten to yet. Wow. Is he an impressive running back? So the story with Messiah Mickens is that there is no longer a story, Fitz. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
He said that he shut it down. He told Hayes Fawcett of On3 that he shut down his recruitment. Now, he has popped up at different spots, and he does a lot of traveling for 7-on-7. He was at Miami a few weeks ago. He went down to South Carolina with Lex Cyrus. I think South Carolina really, really, really wanted him. If you read Ryan Snyder's update on our message board at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, he gets a little bit deeper into things. But this is one that Penn State really likes, and they would like to keep him on board. He's an in-state kid. He's been a leader of this class. He was the first commitment way back in August of the year before last, I guess. So he's been on it for a while. But it's been really interesting to watch his change from Trinity to Harrisburg, because they used him as a more complete football player. And I think the conversation's been funny, because it's been about his supposed weight gain, because he wears a really tight jersey, and it's not, it's very funny to me. But you look at him as a defensive player, you look at him as an actual football player. He does a lot of really good things, and they haven't worn the tread off the tires there at Harrisburg, which I also like. I know they had some struggles early after Sean Lee wasn't allowed to play quarterback, and they kind of had to find themselves, but they eventually found themselves, and Messiah Mickens was a big part of it. Penn State really likes this kid, and they're very, very encouraged by him as a member of that class of 2026. So it's been interesting to follow, but I never felt that it was like going to go elsewhere, but at the same time, it's nice to have that sort of peace of mind.
Yeah, I was watching the film here, and I think the way you characterized it with the jersey and everything, he reminds me a little bit of Marshawn Lynch
Oh,
in
boy.
terms of. So I understand he's probably about 200 pounds, 5'10", but I don't know that I've seen a guy with that build have that kind of lateral agility in a while. So the ability to cut, make moves in the hole, be explosive, and then hit the gear while also having that physical side to him. And you watch him play defensive end, and you can see some of the violence that he plays with, because when you're making house calls and making people miss, like, you don't necessarily see all of the run through and tackle power that you would at linebacker or edge rusher. I just thought it was an interesting different type of player that we've seen from Penn State in a while in terms of the build and the composite skill set, because it's just it doesn't matter. Like, they're looking for good football players, but I just like the diversity and skill sets and some of the ways that Mickens plays that show up on film.
Yeah, I mean, he's 210. So like, Penn State has gone, not like, this isn't a shift in philosophy, but Tyke Hayes, 210 pounds. Jabri Wallace-Coleman, 210 pounds. Messiah Mickens, 210 pounds. So these guys are all bigger than Corey Smith, Quentin Martin, those guys that they brought in. So varying body types, yes. But at the same time, just good football players. Like Tyke Hayes, saw him at camp, 7-on-7 camp last year playing receiver. Like, this guy can play all over the place. Now he's a running back, and I think we fell into that trap with Quentin Martin, but these guys are really, really good football players. Cam Wallace is kind of not the standard, but the guy that we've talked about the most over the last couple of years. His defensive highlights were fantastic. So find these football players, turn them into something, and the running back will take care of itself, I believe. Now they're still looking for another running back in the 2026 class. You kind of figure out right now that every year is going to be two running backs, like, just because of the nature of the position, and guys leave, and guys, will spend less time in college, seemingly, except when they don't, in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. So thanks for shooting that one in the foot. But no, you've got an opportunity to continue to build that room, which is really, really strong right now, and got that added boost of those two guys coming back.
Yeah, and I don't think we talk enough about the fact that both Katron Allen and Nick Singleton got nicked up last year. So the fact that they had both of them and they could both play was a big part of that. And now they can afford to do more of that because they've got more depth to play two running backs, which I think in Andy Kolnicki's offense is important.
Yeah, Penn State is big on learning from best practices, over the course of a couple of years. But with this schedule they played last year, where you played 16 games, you find yourself in a situation where you're like, well, maybe we do need to balance that out a little bit more. Now you've got Corey Smith and Quentin Martin, who you're not worried about a red shirt next year. Like, you're not playing that game where it's 4-4. Maybe you do that with Tyke Hayes and with Jabri Wallace-Coleman, but you've also got Cam Wallace, and you've got those two starters back. So how does September and October look with those running backs? Because number one, they're going to want to get theirs. Like, there's no way around it. They're going to want to do everything they can to boost their draft stock. But you saw the difference in a healthy Katron Allen in December and a healthy Nick Singleton in December and January. So like, that is very interesting to me, of how these carries balance around when you're playing out of conference competition. The out of conference schedule sucks. I mean, I'm not going to get around it. Like, it's not a situation where you have to, think about going to West Virginia week 1 or going to Auburn or something of that nature, but you can balance that out. And I'm very, very excited to see guys like Corey Smith, who can probably get in a more expanded role than we saw from Cam Wallace this year. Yeah. When you learn things like that, it makes a difference.
Let's get to what the next part of here. Of course, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. If you want more information on recruiting, and if you want to go all in, you can subscribe right now for just $1 and get access for a week, so that you can check out all of what Ryan Snyder and Fitz here have been writing over at the site. Let's get it in the mailbag. I kept Nate on the sidelines for too long. Just like Nick Singleton, he needs to get his carries in the game. And we just went through the third quarter and he wasn't even on the field. So we're starting with you, Nate. Scott L is very smart. And Scott had a very long question, which I'm going to try and summarize here. Basically, Nate, what he says is Pat Kraft seems to be crushing it in obtaining donations from mega donors for the stadium. So his point is money not allocated to the stadium from the Penn State bucket of money can now go to NIL and to players. Is that factually correct, that by getting extra money into the program to finance the stadium projects, which are legacy defining, brick and stone immortal, then frees up more money for NIL, or is that not how it works?
No.
Okay. Can you explain then the process or what you understand of the situation?
I mean, they're obligated, and don't quote me, I'm throwing out a number here from my recollection, but I think they're on the hook for $128 million that they intend to raise through philanthropic efforts. That is the goal. That's the number for Penn State of the stadium project. Some of that might be public-private partnership that they might be trying to do, but no, right? I mean, look, there in concept, yes, there is all the money that Penn State can possibly get right now. It is trying to get, but it is also trying to get specific money for the stadium because they have to pay for the stadium. So like the idea of we were planning on like paying for the stadium, but now we're going to redirect that money that's coming into the stadium that otherwise we would have spent on the stadium towards NIL. No,
this is just backfilling the already set commitment, is what you're saying? Like they're just.
Look, I think that there's a fundamental front and center thing to talk about here, which is all this stuff's expensive, right? Like Penn State is spending a ton of money right now. Like it is, right? Ohio State just reported yesterday a $37.5 million deficit, I think, for its spending year last year. Penn State's right. The comps to Ohio State. I'm not saying Penn State will run a deficit this year, but they're spending a lot of money. I mean, there are tons of facility projects going on right now. It is long overdue. There are tons of things, obviously, that come into play based on what's happened over the last 12, 14 years at Penn State, that in terms of its finances. But it is all hands on deck, trying to raise as much money in as many different ways, revenue creation as they possibly can, of which the stadium is a big part of that. The point of the stadium, yes, is to create amenities that are good and obviously fix an aging stadium, but also to keep the faucet going, to increase revenues, to make sure they're squeezing as much juice as they possibly can, because all of this stuff to be competitive at this level costs money.
We're also not going to
get into money.
Yeah, we're not. Here's the other thing. We're not going to be getting into fiscal responsibility of somebody else's money on this show. So I appreciate Nate just spelling out the facts for us. But if you want to have a follow-up conversation, that's a great one to have at bluewhiteillustrated.com. And I'm going to flash my fancy graphic up here. Subscribe for $1 and get into the premium message board where you can ask these questions of Nate for just $1 for a week, and you can try us out and see if you want to join us for a year. Tons of people have taken advantage of that over the last month. We appreciate everyone that's signed up. And as always, this is a part of what we want to do at the Blue White Illustrated message board is get your questions and feature you on the show here. So we got a couple of questions from the message board. We're not going to get to all of them, so of course we'll answer those and have that conversation over on the site as well. Try to get as many from the chat as possible today. It's just a weird vibe from you guys, and everyone has an off day, but we got it back. I think we got it back on track until suddenly now we have either Michigan or Ohio State fans in the chat. So if you've got any questions, what I'm trying to say, if you've got any questions for the show about Penn State football and related topics, we're happy to have that conversation here on the show. Fitz, I'm going to throw this one to you. I have no idea if there's any update, but it says K-Mac wants to know expectations for Keon Wiley, that he appears healthy. Your expectations for Keon Wiley in 2025? I don't know where he is in that health journey specifically.
Yeah, I hate to project a guy coming off an injury to compete as a starter, but like you look at Will and you look at what Penn State has, and I think he's going to be right in the mix. And you saw Keon Wiley for the last month and a half of the season out there moving around pretty well, moving around without a brace. Now we didn't see him do much contact or anything like that, but at the same time, like he was moving better than a guy that. He was moving like a guy you expected to come back at the end of the year, and he didn't. So, but I think he's going to be a big part of that competition. I think he's going to be a Will. I think he's going to be a guy that they lean on as a second level pass rusher. You talk about the potential hybrids between linebackers and edge rushers that can get to the quarterback, and Keon Wiley's kind of that. Like he's a really, really talented pass rusher that's in a linebacker's body. So I'm expecting him to compete. I'm expecting him to continue that rehab and to get stronger. And, it's one of those things, and you wanted to have him down the stretch. You wanted to have him for the playoff run, but, not playing on that keeps him healthy and keeps him, and it just gives him a couple extra months to get where he needs to get heading into the spring. So I'm excited for him because I think he's a really talented football player. They need numbers at linebacker. They need guys that can step up and do different things for them at linebacker. And I think Wiley is one of those guys. So he was going to play last year before he got hurt. Now he bumped that back a year. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I think he's more of an outside guy. We've talked about him as a potential Mike as well. But I think he's more of a box Will down to the pass rusher type guy. So I'm excited to see what he can do. And really, I'm excited for all these guys that are coming back from injury because, you know what they go through. Nate, you tore an ACL once. You know what they go through. Exactly the same kind of rehab. But Keon Wiley, Zariah Fisher, eventually Alonzo Ford will get back. So, you've got guys that have a lot of potential. We will see varying degrees of those guys in the spring, but very important pieces. And I didn't even mention the starting right tackle and Anthony Dunca. So there's a lot to like coming off of injury. You just hope those guys are ready to go. And I think Wiley, based on what we've seen on the practice field, should be pretty well along in that scale.
I'm interested to see how that linebacker room evolves or changes in this defense, which is a little more even further away from playing three linebackers than some of the other defenses we've seen. Now, part of that is because of circumstance and injury, and I'm sure like they will adapt to whatever happens next year. But with Keon Wiley, I'm interested to see like specifically there's some packages within like the base defense. If they do go to three linebackers, Knowles really likes to walk linebackers up and use them as pseudo edge rushers off, and keep that two linebacker structure, on the second level. So be interesting to see what versatility they can get out of a guy like Keon Wiley. This is for both of you. I don't know specifically if either of you have the answer to this, but it's an interesting question. Penn State 2012, that's a great question. It seems like our NIL game has stepped up, according to him, about Penn State's efforts. Is Penn State in a better place to win a recruiting battle like Finney in the class of 2026? Fitz, you can address the recruiting side. Nate, if you want to address the NIL side, I know we just had a conversation around this general topic, but specifically with the NIL stuff, do you think that there's been change and improvement in terms of maybe some of the donations to that side, which are less public than the ones where you're going to get your name on something on the stadium?
Who's
Nate,
first?
We'll start with you.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. A little bit. Certainly they're continuing to make that effort, and I think that Penn State fans are starting to embrace the idea a little bit more. I do still think it's a hard sell just generally. Right. Look, Penn State wanted to approach this and felt as though it could be a differentiator by appealing to the masses and by going as broadly with NIL as it possibly could. I think that thinking has faded because it's just really hard to do. It's just right. The notion of $5 and $10 donations and $25 donations, even $100 donations monthly, or whatever the subscription tier is. I just think it's really difficult to move the needle that way. They're not going to turn it down, and you need large levers,
right? You pull big levers, you get big outcomes.
They really have put a ton of time and energy and necessary energy, and this is a thing that takes years to do. Fostering relationships with the guys that can write 7-figure checks, and women, and like families that can write 7-figure checks. And so by making those efforts, I think that they feel like they're moving in the right direction on those things. I think that some of the stuff that, I don't know, anybody saw the Pat McAfee clip from yesterday about like, oh, Penn State doesn't care about money. That like they are loaded. 100 guys, making $100,000 donations. That is nonsense. Like flat out, not. And I get it. It's not shade. Like they're not supposed to know the inner workings of Penn State athletics, but it is not that at all. And so, there will be.
It's good for the vibes, though. Like, I mean, having that clip out there,
the narrative.
Great for the vibes around Penn State.
I think that's a great point. That you look at Penn State's willingness to spend money and Pat Kraft's willingness to spend money. There's some psychological aspects there at play when you say, "Hey, we're willing to do this. We need our donors on board." And if you're not on board, like I said on the board the other day, you're not going to have a spot on the parade float. Like that is kind of like mobilize. That's a different way to mobilize. Does it work? I don't know. I don't have that kind of money. But you look at, oh, Nate, you okay there?
Yeah.
Okay.
You clutched your pearls suddenly. I didn't know.
Yeah, I was ready to fire one off. You go, continue.
No, but that's a way to mobilize bases. I mean, winning helps everything, obviously, but like aggressiveness, and you want to be on the team that's making the play for Jim Knowles. Like you want to be on that sort of wavelength there. And I think that is something that Pat Kraft brings across. And I think that whether the money is there or not, like the ability and the aggressiveness is there.
Go for it.
The note, like I don't remember what the idiom is. Like the hay is in the barn, right? Is that what it's called? Like when the hay is in the, like you're acting like it's not there. It's not there currently.
There are too many idioms that you didn't narrow it down because there's the hay's in the barn. Make hay while the sun is shining. That doesn't happen ananymore with haylage.
If hay, like 8 sayings or something.
If hay is money, it's not in the barn. I
think you're counting your chickens before they're hatched is what we're doing here.
Penn State's trying to collect the hay.
Yes.
Put it in the barn. Anyway, Go ahead.
Do you want to answer the other side of that, Fitz? Is there anything interesting on that side from the NIL and Penn State's interactions with players in this recruiting cycle? And these two don't have to be related, but somebody wanted to know, does Penn State have a chance to land Connor Salmon? Connor Salmon. What are your thoughts there? Let's just skip to that one.
Yeah. Okay. First off, with the NIL situation, they were strong for a guy like Andrew Olish there at the end of the cycle last year. So it continues to get better. It continues to be aggressive where it needs to be, and I think more so on the side of aggressive versus stupid. So I think that's the side that you want to be on. Connor Salmon is supposed to be here this weekend. Is still finalizing plans for this weekend. But yeah, they've made him a priority. I think Notre Dame's in there. I think Clemson's in there. I think they're in a good spot right now. But I don't know that I would say they're far and away the leader or anything like that. So I think they've got a shot with him. Messiah, too many Messiahs in this class. But Messiah Hampton's going to come in this weekend. Travis Johnson's still on the board. Davion Brown's still on the board. So a lot of receivers still on the board, and what's already a pretty good receiver class for Penn State in 2026. So I think definitely got a shot there. But like I said, Notre Dame is always prevalent in recruitments like that. Clemson the same. So I think that Penn State is showing him. They went down to see him. James Franklin went to his school, and they've done in-homes and things like that. So they're making him a priority, and rightfully so. He's a freak athlete that can really help you. And also at Bullis now, which is a school Penn State's got a pretty good relationship with. So he moves a little bit closer to sort of the epicenter here in Happy Valley. So I think, definitely got a shot there. And I did it without making a salmon pun. So good on me. Yeah.
Fantastic. JC says mixed metaphors are the icing on the pie, and there's no two ands, ifs, or buts about it. That is absolutely correct. Last question here. Let's see did we get to everything? Stadium money benefits. Yeah, Fitz, you and I have been talking about this one. This is the last question. We'll get back to the football side of stuff. Which players currently on the roster will benefit the most from Knowles' scheme that will maximize their talents? I've been thinking a lot about this over the last couple of days. I have a couple in mind, but I wanted you to go first in case you had one that you wanted to fire off.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think Penn State has a Caleb Downs, so you got to find a guy that can be that guy. Like Zakee Wheatley is fantastic, like a really, really good football player, but can he do as much on the football field as Downs? I don't think it's an insult to say not so much because there's not too many people in college football that can. So very curious on how that works. You look at what Jim Knowles likes to do, and he likes to make his defensive line work. He likes to make his defensive line make those plays, and I think you got guys like Zane Durant that is certainly talented enough to flourish in a situation like that. But deny Dennis Sutton, like he knows it's his time. He knows what's at stake here in what should be his final year. And you've got an opportunity for him to, be like Jack Sawyer was built up throughout the college football playoff. I think Denny might be a better player. So very curious to see how that one works out, because they're going to get opportunities to do things on their own, and then, eventually get it to a down and distance where you can blitz and make some things happen. So those two guys up front, I know that you want to get into an AJ Harris thing here. The more hybrid, I think with his defense, the more hybrid you can be, whether it be corner safety hybrid, safety linebacker hybrid, linebacker edge hybrid, then the more, I don't want to say value, but the more upside that you have in getting all over the field and making plays. So I think AJ Harris fits that mode as well.
Yeah, AJ Harris. So I was thinking specifically with the fact that, I went into and watched a video of him, a coaching clinic of him talking about some of his fundamentals for linebackers specifically, but it translates to other positions. And he talked about their idea of, he called it muckle, which is his idea of playing as physical in pass coverage as possible within the rules when you're playing in man coverage, getting your hands on guys, being aggressive in that sense. And AJ Harris loves that. So if there is an added level, added dimension of him being able to grab, tug, pull, be physical instead of just jamming at the line of scrimmage, because we've seen them do it a couple of different ways at Ohio State under Jim Knowles, I think that's an advantage for him, who maybe isn't the fastest guy in the world, to just be a shadow corner, as opposed to a guy who can be a lockdown man corner with some of those other tools in his belt. But the guy that I've been thinking about, and I don't want to go all in on this, but I just want to gently float this out here as my last thought. You mentioned Caleb Downs, and nobody is Caleb Downs. That's correct. But what aspects of him can you facsimilate at Penn State? King Mack coming downhill. I'm excited for how that works in this defense. And I think there are times where he puts a safety basically as a middle linebacker 8 yards off the ball and has him just go hunt. King Mack in that role, I think, could be really fun. And so what does that look like? How does that work within the whole defense? That's what we're going to find out spring football and onward. But that's just one of the names in my head that was floating around of what is the unique talents fits that you mentioned that they could highlight. They've used that with a couple of different players over the years at Ohio State in the system. Hasn't just been Downs. Proctor and Ransom have both kind of played a role like that. So I'm curious to see who might be that guy in this defense. Final thoughts here. We got to get out.
Zion mentioned Zion Tracy. I think it's a good one. We saw his hybridness this year, and I think he did a really good job with that. Essentially playing a safety, like as a corner, playing a safety. So I'm very curious to see how his role continues to evolve and if he flourishes in that role as well.
Final thoughts here. Nate, what are you working on this week over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com?
I can't believe nobody brought up basketball.
I was going to open with it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's top of mind. No, Penn State is going through it, but they do have the return to rec game on Thursday night. So we'll be covering that extensively. And, I do think that there are some more leaves to turn over with Jim Knowles that we'll continue to discuss as this week goes on. And in the sense of the arduous process, right, that this has been. And it's not just Jim Knowles. And so I do think that all of this is a crescendo over years and years and years. Not to, right? Was the Bills season a complete failure because they didn't get to the Super Bowl? Maybe that's too raw. I don't know.
Oh, you did it.
We had a whole segment that I just couldn't get into called football therapy. Yes.
But point
the
being
answer is yes.
The objective for Penn State next year is to get to the playoff. That's number one. And then win all the games, right? Like that's what you're trying to do. But they're two separate objectives. You got to get to the playoff first. And so that is priority number one, is winning as many games as you can to put yourself in an advantageous position like they did this year, right? And then you see where the chips fall.
Yeah.
I think expecting a national championship to happen is, maybe a little over the top, but that doesn't mean that the aspiration should be any different than that. And that is the aspiration, and that's what they're going for.
We'll be talking about all these things and more at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We are out of time, though, so appreciate everyone. It's the fact that we're still playing injured here in late January after coming back from the Orange Bowl. Like, Florida is not good for your guys' health, despite the sun and the vitamins, the vitamin D. Like, came back with more than I expected, but I think we're heading in the right direction, just like maybe Penn State football. There goes Nate. We got to go. Everything's falling apart. We'll see you later.